Zettel für die lange Weg. 2 Flaschen Whisky für die Zeit. Und ich den gern habe, du bist dabei. Maria geht, fahrt mal weg, ist weit. Wann ich geh, ich werd dir fehlen, wann ich geh. Du sehst nicht, was ich mach, du sehst nicht, wie ich lach. Ich werd dir fehlen, du watsch sehen. Hab kriegt mein Zettel für den langen Weg. Du schönste, als mir finden kann. Es hat Maria und Dale ganz wunderbar. Als ich dir den weißen Dank. Wann ich geh, ich werd dir fehlen, wann ich geh. Du sehst nicht, was ich mach, du sehst nicht, wie ich lach. Ich werd dir fehlen, du watsch sehen. Well, Gute Abend, liebe Lied. Welcome back to another edition of PA Dutch Live. It is so good to be with all of you. The clock's just jumped ahead here in the United States this past weekend. My body's still trying to catch up. And what I realized is that Europe isn't, they didn't jump ahead yet. So our German friends that are watching tonight actually don't have to stay up till midnight. They only have to stay up till 11 p.m. And I know you're out there. For those of you that are joining us for the first time, welcome to PA Dutch Live. I'm glad that you took some time out of your busy lives to join the show tonight and watch along as we have a great show coming up for you. And if you are joining us for the second, third, fourth, fifth, 24th time, you know what to do. Please, whether you're watching on YouTube or on the Facebook page, put in the comment section where you are joining us from. We'll give some shout outs to people as we do every month. We got Kathy joining us from Elizabethtown, Lancaster County. Kathy joins us almost every month. It's good to have you again, Kathy. Our good friend Jeff Marks, he was on the show a couple months ago. He's from Walberstädtel. You know where that is. And if you don't know Walberstädtel, well, you got to look at Mount Etna on the Google Maps, and that'll show you where that is, where our long-bearded friend lives. Yes, we have a mutual friend with a long beard who also lives in Walberstädtel. Brittany is joining us from Allentown, Lehigh Valley represented. Our guest this evening is also a Lehigh Valley alum, so we'll have to talk Lehigh Valley a little bit once we bring Josh on. Our good friend Norman is joining us. Gute Abend aus Steinbach am Glane, Rheinland-Pfalz is joining us. And Norman, you didn't have to stay up as late this month, but thank you for staying up till 11 and joining us as well. Our good friend Don is joining us from Midlothian, Virginia. He joins us darn near every month. Don, it's good to have you back. Our dear friend Carol is joining us from beautiful downtown Burnville. Carol, are your tulips blooming yet? If not, I'll bet you it's coming soon. We had some warm weather there for a while, made everything push. You know what I mean? Gary, Dolly, our good friend Dolly, she joins us every week as well from beautiful Fleetwood there in Berks County. And Gary from Egypt, not Egypt the country, everybody, Egypt, Pennsylvania. They don't have quite as big of pyramids in Egypt, Pennsylvania as they do in regular Egypt. Krista's joining us also. Hey, Don's wife, thanks for joining us. Are you guys watching on separate screens, or are you sitting next to each other on the couch? I'm just curious, Krista. Thanks for joining us. Angie's joining us from York County, that Delta P. I don't think I've ever been to Delta, Pennsylvania, but if it's in York County, I'll just have to get down there at some time. Our good friend Brigitte is joining us from Philadelphia. Brigitte, you know what I'm going to say. We're waiting on a new song from you guys. Let us know. And David is joining us from San Diego. We got the West Coast represented. Thanks for joining us, David. Angel loves cats. Hello, Hair Maidenford. Well, hello from Beech Creek, Pennsylvania. Oh, Angelina. Yeah, I figured that's who you were. Yeah, one of my current students is joining us tonight. Beech Creek, Pennsylvania. We got Clinton County represented as well. And also Donna is joining us from Holtwood, Pennsylvania. The Wiswassers. Boy, we got a lot of people joining us. The Wiswassers are joining us. Hi. Is that son of yours still picking that banjo is good? I'm sure he is. Well, everyone, if I didn't catch you this time around, I'll try and catch you later on in the show, but keep those comments coming in, of course. Every month we start the same way. Let me pull this presentation here into the screen. Oh, real quick, Scott, our good friend Scott is joining us from Penargle there in Northampton County. Scott, I'm still waiting on my, from Martin. We'll talk sometime, right? No, but we got a great show coming at you tonight. We start every month the same way. If you're joining us for the first time, we have some things going on in the greater Pennsylvania Dutch country that I'd like to let everybody aware of. Some things are coming up really quickly, so get your calendars out, as we would say. The Pennsylvania German Sammerlauf. They don't have on here what number this is. They've been doing this for years. I'm not quite sure how many there's been, but there's been more than one for sure. It is this Saturday. I know not so much time to get this on your calendars, but it's this Saturday at the Midway Diner there in right outside of Bethel, Pennsylvania, off I-78. It's a whole day of great things, Pennsylvania Dutch, but I highly recommend, if you're going to go, you got to stick around till 2 o'clock, because then these two knuckleheads, Doug Maidenford and Chris LaRose, will be taking the stage to do a live Ask a Pennsylvania Dutchman. If you've never seen us live, we're even more attractive live than we are on YouTube. Although you can't mute us live like you can on YouTube, so you make the call. But that is a free event. There's lots of good things that are going to be going on. Pennsylvania Dutch food. There's going to be vendors as well. There's going to be some educational opportunities and other musicians as well performing. So check that out if you're in the greater Lebanon, Berks County area there this Saturday. Our good friend that'll be joining us here in a little bit probably will talk a little bit more about this on Sunday. Saturday, you can check me out. And on Sunday, it was so popular the first time around that Dr. Josh and Patrick will be doing the presentation on Mountain Mary again. They've been invited back to do it again. There was so much interest. So that'll be at the Pennsylvania German Cultural Heritage Center. It'll be this Sunday. There are still tickets available. At least as of yesterday, there were still tickets available. To learn more information about this, please check out the kutztownfestival.com's website and you can get tickets. It'll be a great presentation all about Mountain Mary. The first one was really, really well received. So I'm sure this one, it's the same thing, but for an opportunity for people who didn't see it the first time to get a chance to see it as well. And I believe, and Josh can correct me later on, but this is also in a partnership with the German embassy. So the government of Germany sees the value in this stuff, and they are investing in programs and Pennsylvania Dutch programs. This is wonderful to hear, and I hope that we can keep that friendship going in the future. March 25th, you have an opportunity to learn how to do Pennsylvania German scratch eggs, to how to scratch Easter egg type stuff. That'll be at the Berks History Center there in just outside of Reading, Pennsylvania. They are doing some quality educational opportunities there. They have, of course, the PA Dutch online courses that are full to capacity, so much so that poor Brad has to add, he's been adding extra sections because there's so many people interested in learning Pennsylvania Dutch. And this is just another one of their opportunities. I'm not sure if this has a cost involved or not, but go to the Berks History Center's website or their Facebook page to learn more. It'd be a cool opportunity to learn how to scratch eggs if you've never done that. Maybe your grandparents did it and they never taught you, or, you know, one of those type things. But here's an opportunity for you to learn that art and that skill. And also, one last thing to announce, we have Easter on the Farm coming up April 1st at the Pennsylvania German Cultural Heritage Center there at Kutztown University. That's another free event. It's an outdoor, all outdoor. There are some exhibits inside and things going on inside some of their buildings, in the one-room schoolhouse, in the farmhouse, in the barn, in the summer kitchen. Our good friend Terry Berger is going to be there, I believe, cooking again and baking. So that's a great opportunity for anyone that's looking for something to do and learn more about Pennsylvania Dutch Easter traditions. There are a lot to learn about. So you can check that out on April 1st there at the Cultural Heritage Center at Kutztown University. Of course, follow their social media to learn more or get more details about who's going to be performing and what's all going to be available. I think there's usually an Easter egg hunt for little kids as well. A lot of really good things happening. Real quick, we've got some other people joining the show. I'd love to give them a shout out. Christian Meyer says, awesome. I agree, Christian. I don't know what I said that's awesome, but I agree with you. Whatever it was awesome. And Charlie Moore, he's joined us before, joining us from downtown Whitehall. Is Whitehall big enough to have a downtown? I guess so. And real quick, Edgar says, hey, I know I'm late. Edgar, that's fine. At least you're here joining us. Every month, we've been sharing comic strips that have been shared and created by our good friend Stefan Boisel in the Pfalz. And here's this month's. I'll read it for you. We'll do the Dutch first. We got the same two characters that we've had every other month. The wife says, Sie haben Eppa von Washington auf dem Weg zum Mund geschickt. Und der Mann, her husband says, "For was jush einer?" Now, for those of you that speak Pennsylvania Dutch or understand, I hope you laughed at that because I think it is funny. For those of you that don't, here's a rough translation, I guess we could say. She's reading a newspaper and she says, they sent someone from Washington on their way to the moon. And the husband says, why just one? I'm sure we all can agree with that, with the craziness going on in the politics and political scene here in our beloved Pennsylvania and the United States as a whole. Hey, every month also we do a quick salute in shout out to my hee-haw past. And this month, drum roll, we give a huge salute to the town of Higgins up there in Schuylkill County, Pennsylvania, up in the, as they call it there, the Skook. Higgins has a very colorful past, of course, famous for the pigeon shoot that took place there for, oh my gosh, probably over 100 years. They don't think they're doing the pigeon shoot anymore, but they did for a very long time. And that's a beautiful region of southern Schuylkill County. A lot of Pennsylvania Dutch farms and Pennsylvania Dutch people settled there and still live there. We want to give them a shout out. Founded in 1854, and according to the internet, their current population, as far as I could find, was right around 1,205 people up there in beautiful Higgins. So salute to our good friends there north of the Blue Mountains in Higgins, Schuylkill County. Enough schwetzing. It's time for somebody else to do some schwetzing. This month, I welcome a good friend of mine and a good friend of the channel. Josh has done a lot of things with me over the years, and we have this long past. And I was so happy when I asked him if he'd be willing to come on the show. And he knows so much. And I was like, what do I want Josh to talk about? Because he can talk about so many things, and he talks about them so well. And I decided, out of all the things, he recently gave a talk at the Schwenkfelders about the topic that he's going to be talking about tonight. And I happened to catch the Zoom link and watch his presentation. It was wonderful. I was like, that's it. That's what I want Josh to talk to you guys about. So I'm here to welcome Dr. Josh Brown, and we'll bring him into the stream right now. Josh, welcome to the show.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, you clear. So perfect. I always start every episode kind of the same way. Give our audience a quick opportunity to learn a little bit about you. Not the full bio, but tell us a little bit. Where were you born and raised, and what is your Pennsylvania Dutch connection?
Well, I was born in Allentown, but raised in Emmaus, which is right next door. And my Pennsylvania Dutch connection. My mother's family is nearly entirely Pennsylvania Dutch. My father's family is just a quarter Pennsylvania Dutch. So I had grown up living with my grandmother, and she spoke Pennsylvania Dutch at home, and she would often speak it with her sister. And I just kind of got interested in listening in on their conversations. And then I went to my undergrad at Millersville and needed a job. And so I worked with Dick Beam on his dictionary project for a number of years, and kind of got back into the language from there. And then went to do my dissertation at Penn State and decided to do it on Pennsylvania Dutch as well. And so it's just been a constant kind of in my life, the language mostly, but I'm also a weaver, and so I work in Pennsylvania Dutch tradition for that as well.
Yeah, and you do beautiful, beautiful work. I will link Josh's personal website where it shows some of the stuff that he does on his looms. Just wonderful, wonderful things. But that isn't what we brought you here for tonight. So you're going to talk to us about Pennsylvania Dutch Civil War letters. I want to ask this question first. Out of all the things that you've researched so many different things and so many different topics. How did you land on this?
Well, it started at the Center for Pennsylvania German Studies at Millersville. And there was a binder there of photocopies of a diary that had been kept during the Civil War. And I don't know if it was forgotten about, or if, someone had come and had given the diary to Dick Beam to photocopy, and he had put it in this binder, and I think he had meant to give it to somebody. Anyway, it was 10 years later that I stumbled across it and was looking for stuff to put into the journal. And I realized that no one had worked on it since it had been photocopied. Someone had made like little notes throughout it, but nothing much. So we recontacted the guy who owned it, and made better photocopies at that point so that it was a little bit more legible. And then, so I had been translating that, and then along the way, I would kind of casually mention to people that was translating this Pennsylvania Dutch Civil War diary, and they would say, "Oh, I have letters," you know. And so then they would, make copies of the letters and make them available to me. So it kind of it took on kind of a life of its own, I guess, after a while. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's dive into what you've learned, what you found out about this. Josh has some images that he's going to share with us, so I'll let him take over the screen, so to speak, if we can do it.
Sure, right?
Yeah, and I can bring it in then. Yep.
Oh, perfect. All right, great. So I'm going to talk tonight, as Doug mentioned, about the wonderfully underexplored area of Pennsylvania Dutch letters and diaries, especially during the Civil War. Oops. There we go. So when the Civil War broke out in April 1861, the Pennsylvania Dutch newspaper, the Reading Adler, was really quick to denounce it. Bürgerkrieg, as they have, in the big letters all throughout the page, they wrote that the very word was appalling to them, and it was deemed the most unnatural kinds of wars that existed on the planet. But although we have this kind of initial reaction from the Pennsylvania Dutch country as being, outrightly outraged against the Civil War, the Pennsylvania Dutch throughout the war, as it went on, would experience a whole range of sentiments toward their commitment to the war effort, and the preservation of the Union. And those sentiments, that whole range of sentiments, would come from both within their own communities and sort of lobbed at them from the outside as well. So the Pennsylvania Dutch were fairly non-reactionary at the start, and their political leanings were away from Abraham Lincoln and his party. And so outsiders saw the Pennsylvania Dutch as potential copperheads. And so the Copperhead movement was one that was pushing for an immediate peace settlement with the Confederates, that, we shouldn't even enter into the war. But in reality, and Dave Voluska and Christian Keller have shown this, that this inaction, this kind of wait and see attitude that the Pennsylvania Dutch had, was really due in large part to their religious constraints, to their harvesting schedules, and the very fact that their lives and their livelihoods were being disrupted. Unfortunately, outsiders really only noted a single activity of the Pennsylvania Dutch, and that was they were accused of blatant war profiteering. So you have this picture here from a contemporary, it's a contemporary cartoon that shows kind of a stereotypical Pennsylvania Dutchman who's selling Susquehanna River water to a thirsty soldier from New York. And it poked fun at this war profiteering that was happening, at least the outside was accusing the Pennsylvania Dutch as doing. Unfortunately, though, the actual voices of the Pennsylvania Dutch have been left out of many of those accounts, those contemporary accounts, and then historical accounts that would come later. The Pennsylvania Dutch have a command of several languages at that time, especially, and they often told their own stories in their dominant language, so Pennsylvania Dutch. But being a minority language, it often fell on deaf ears. So hopefully we can, over time, resurrect those voices and see what the Pennsylvania Dutch actually felt. For people who might not be aware, the Pennsylvania Dutch at that time would have had the best ability in their native language, Pennsylvania Dutch, and just kind of to give a brief rundown of what that is in just a few sentences. We have several German dialects leveling in the second half of the 18th century. And Mark Loudon kind of targets the generation of 1750 to 1780 as being the important generation for the formation of the Pennsylvania Dutch language. They also had more or less of a passive knowledge of German. Their books, newspapers, schooling, that would have all been in German. There was a public school act that was passed in 1834 in Pennsylvania, but by the end of the Civil War, there were still 23 school districts within the Dutch country that refused to accept the Public School Act and refused to teach English. So they were still teaching German well after the Civil War. But really how much schooling there was, the level of schooling, the time there was limited. They were distant from the European homeland. And that meant that their variety of German would eventually develop into their own form of Pennsylvania High German. That's kind of what we call it today, is this Pennsylvania form of German. And then, of course, English they would have also had in their repertoire, depending on the individual and their contacts with non-Pennsylvania Dutch speakers. English was also learned and used. So we have several languages that the Pennsylvania Dutch would have been exposed to. And you can see the realities of the Pennsylvania Dutch languages. Here, this is a will inventory from 1814, and you can see at the top of it, I'll just kind of zoom in at the top there, you can see that at the top it's written in Pennsylvania High German and Pennsylvania Dutch, but then there's the more official writing down at the bottom, which is in English. And it really captures kind of this multilingual, this many-languaged lives of the Pennsylvania Dutch. So if they have all these languages at their disposal and they go into the Civil War, what languages are they going to write in? Well, when people first started publishing Pennsylvania Dutch writings from the Civil War, they were mostly historical societies, and they were publishing English language ones in the middle of the 20th century, like the Reichert and the Mattern letters. And although they're completely in English, both soldiers, Reichert and Mattern, show signs of Pennsylvania Dutch. Their English would show signs of interference with their native language. So in this first example, I tell you, we know to make shift first grade Guillermo, ain't it? Where he uses, instead of writing the word commotion or ado or something like that, he uses the Pennsylvania Dutch word Guillermo in his English letters. And then you also have instances like the second example, send me sometimes a tract or religious paper, which is, basically Pennsylvania Dutch. It's a Pennsylvania Dutch word construction, sentence construction that just is.
Now, Josh, there are going to be people watching this show that'll say, there's nothing wrong with that word order in that bottom sentence. I would say that. Now, send me sometime.
It's definitely dialectal to Pennsylvania. And then, so like in the 1980s, slowly some writings from the Pennsylvania Dutch, and I mean by writings of the Pennsylvania Dutch, writings of everyday people. We would have, writings of Pennsylvania Dutch governors, for example, not in Pennsylvania Dutch, but in English. But we actually start having writings from everyday people, like the Schuler family correspondence that was published in Pennsylvania Folklife. And they were writing over the Civil War, also before the Civil War. They participated in the California Gold Rush, really interesting letters. And you can see their English is very Pennsylvania Dutch influenced, right? That first line, I had hard luck. I had hard luck, and paid instead of paid. And then sometimes they also switch between the languages, between English and Pennsylvania Dutch. Like in the second example, they're kind of switching between the languages. So we start just in the 1980s seeing Pennsylvania Dutch from this time period written in letters and diaries being published for everyone pretty much to read what they were writing. Then the 1990s and the 2000s come along, and we have 8 letters that surface. They're pretty much all in Pennsylvania High German, with some Pennsylvania Dutch, of course, thrown in. But they're pretty much one-off letters. I mean, the Weidlich correspondence has 4 letters. But then in the 2000s, we just kind of have one-off letters that are being published or being found by Pennsylvania Dutch soldiers during the Civil War. So tonight, I'm going to highlight the largest collections of Civil War writings that have surfaced so far that are written in Pennsylvania Dutch and Pennsylvania High German, and then with some English thrown in. The first one that I'll share some excerpts from is the Haupt Diary. Private Joel Haupt was born in Shamokin. He enlisted in the 46th Regiment, and he kept a diary each day of his service from March 1864 until the end of the war in 1865. So now, why has it taken 150 years for these writings to get noticed? Well, you can really see why on the screen. It's written in a very idiosyncratic variety of Old German script. But not entirely. If you take a look at just this one example, I mean, there's also some regular Latin script thrown in there. So he goes between 2 different script styles. So like Wednesday and North Carolina, he writes in, normal script, and then everything else is in this Old German script. And he also puts in kind of these curious words, like this word, etwens, which took the longest time for me to kind of realize that what he was writing was advance. So it's very idiosyncratic. It's very, down to an individual. This is kind of what language he's producing as a poor farmer from Shamokin. And he's pulling English, he's pulling German, he's pulling Pennsylvania Dutch all together, and Pennsylvania Dutch English all together, just to write a few lines in his diary every day. So what happens then is that sometimes you'll have an entry like this entry that's pretty much Pennsylvania Dutch. So sind mir gemerkt 12 Mile und warnen der Advance und hat gereert und sind in North Carolina gemerkt. Pretty much Pennsylvania Dutch. But then, pages later, you get an entry that's in more standard German, more Pennsylvania High German. It just has borrowings from Pennsylvania Dutch in it, like Strehl and Lied would be borrowings from Pennsylvania Dutch. So bin ich in Alexandrie und die Lied bekommen Strehl und Bücher und Zeitungen als ein Geschenk. So it really is a mixture of Pennsylvania High German and Pennsylvania Dutch words like Light and Strehl. So after you kind of get over that hurdle of deciphering, first of all, what he's writing, how his script is, and then getting over the fact of what he's actually saying, and so once we start reading it, we get a sense then of the really historical moments that he's experiencing. So here we have this kind of really historical moment that he's being reviewed by General Sherman. So sind wir noch da und der Sherman hat uns reviewed in Savannah und ein Dressbrett gehabt. And so he's talking about this dress parade that's similar to the picture below of the 50th Pennsylvania having dress parade at Gettysburg. And really then, as we kind of read through the entire diary, and he mentions Sherman, he mentions Savannah, we realize really quickly that what he's writing is a record in Pennsylvania Dutch, mostly, with some Pennsylvania High German, with some English thrown in, of Sherman's march to the sea and the destruction of Savannah. So historically, it's a really fascinating document to have, not only for the language aspect or the cultural aspect, but for the historical aspect as well. And we know that Sherman's march to the sea was very destructive, and he certainly notes that throughout his diary. Haben wir den Riegelweg aufgerissen und den Reberbrück verbrennt und den Depot, right? Of them going along and just burning and ripping things up as they went along. Another set of recent discovery of letters of recent discovery are the Shoemaker letters. And they're about 15 letters, 15 letters solely in Pennsylvania Dutch, Pennsylvania High German, with a little bit of English thrown in. But then they have more letters that are also in English, that were written by Privates William and Benjamin Shoemaker from Long Swamp in Berks County, who both served in the 128th Regiment. And first of all, their handwriting is leagues better than Private Haupt's, and their command of German is much better. But what makes them fascinating is that they flip back and forth between English and German completely fluidly. So if we look at this one letter here, on the left-hand side, they're writing in English. It starts out, dear brother, I hope to see you all before long. And then as soon as they get to the bottom of the page, they end it, and then they go to the top of the next page, and they switch completely then to German, to Pennsylvania High German. They start with weiter mir hoffen, bezahlt zu werden. And so they do this constantly, where they'll write a paragraph, and then they'll switch the language. And it's just so fascinating to see. We hear so much about this dumb Dutch stereotype, and we see, quite plainly that you have these poor farmers from Berks County in this example who have multiple languages at their disposal, and they're able to go between those multiple languages like nothing is going on. Not only are they able to do it, but they know that the readers, their audience, are able to go between these languages with no problem at all. And that's absolutely fascinating. We know that multilinguals score higher for intelligence. We know that. And so, this dumb Dutch stereotype really doesn't apply if we look at these things. So since this is a set of correspondence, it's not just a one-off letter or 4 letters. This is a whole series of correspondence that spans several years. We really can see the changing emotions that they experienced during the war. And at the start, they are really enthusiastic for the nation and for the outlook of the war. Nun muss ich meinen Brief beschließen, hurrah for the Union, hurrah, dry hurrah for the United States, right? And you get, similar sentiments to that. They're showing pride in later excerpts in their country's support of the soldiers. Their mother must be, kind of worried if they have warm clothing. And so they write back and they kind of settle her nerves that, Uncle Sam wouldn't let his boys down, right? So du sagst, die Mama det wundert, ob mir guten Kleider haben. Der hen mir so viel aus mir kriegen. Sie sind auch warm und den Kleider fällt es nicht. Der Uncle Sam ist noch reich. Lasst seinen Buben nicht stärken. They get a gift of cigars from home to kind of celebrate a victory, and they compare themselves to Abraham Lincoln, right, as this great gentleman in his capital in Washington, D.C. And they're writing this kind of in Pennsylvania Dutch English. So, and further, I was very glad for the cigars were smoking like gentlemen, like old Abraham Lincoln in his capital in Washington. All of these early sentiments of hope are written in mixtures of English and Pennsylvania Dutch and Pennsylvania High German, and they go very seamlessly through each of them. So like this example on the back of one of their letters, Uncle Sam in Washington, he got money enough and cloth enough for his boys. No more for this time. Ich leise euch alle grüßen. Right soon back. Right? They're just switching completely between these languages. And it's not messiness and it's not chaos. It's just completely natural to do these things. Any bilingual will do this, will switch between their languages. But because this is a series of correspondence, as time goes on, the brothers' sentiments towards the war change, obviously. So we get things like, oh, Bruder, ich wollte Krieg den Ende nehmen. Dann es wäre besser für uns und für euch alle, wenn wir wieder heim hätten gehen. Nun will ich mein Schreiben schließen und lass mich vom Herzen grüßen alle. Yeah, that they are looking to go home at a certain point, that it's reached a point for them to go home. And of course, that point happens because they're watching their friends and neighbors die around them. One of the brothers writes about, somebody in their company who had heard that if they were sick, they would be able to, go home. And so the doctor is looking at this one guy and he says, there's nothing wrong with him. It's homesickness. And, he has to stay. And they leave it up to one of these brothers to tell him that he has to stay. And so you wonder, did the person understand English? Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? He had to be told by one of these brothers that, you had to stay rather than actually go. And they're watching their neighbors die around them. And they are the ones then that have to send that news home to Berks County, to Long Swamp. So I'm letting you know that Charles Geist died on the 6th and will be buried on the 8th. He had typhoid fever. It's better to die like that than with the sword. Plenty more will probably go the way of our friend Charles and our friend Nathan Hinkle before we get home. And so you really get a sense of, this isn't a wait and see Pennsylvania Dutch who are profiting from war. These are actual young men who are being exposed to really atrocious things, and they're having to, in their teens and their 20s, they're having to grapple with major moments of life and death and be the ones who then send that news back home. In many ways, it's very shocking, right? For them to be kind of thrust onto a national stage, especially being Pennsylvania Dutch, and how that then impacts the rest of their lives. By the end of the war, you can really tell in the letters that their spirits lift, obviously. They see the end in sight. Abraham Lincoln is dead by this point, but they had just executed, or they had just killed John Wilkes Booth. And they write about that, and they write kind of with pride that, he's never going to kill another person. He's never going to kill another president. So we hope to come home before long. The report is that they'll send us home today. The rebels are pretty nearly played out, and the matter is dead. His name is Booth. He'll never kill another man like Abraham Lincoln, and he'll never kill another president and no one else. We want to come home when it's over, and damn the rebels. I send my greetings to you all. 3 cheers for the Union and for our country and for our right. Then we're bound to have it. So after looking through these letters and the diary and the other letters that have surfaced over the years, I still have so many questions. So now that we have a real corpus of a real pile of letters and diaries that are written by the Pennsylvania Dutch in their own languages, be they Pennsylvania Dutch, be they Pennsylvania High German, be they Dutchified English, what do these things then tell us about the roles of ethnic minority groups in a time of national crisis? people had always kind of, shrugged off the role of the Pennsylvania Dutch. And so we really need to start reevaluating the Pennsylvania Dutch role in the Civil War. Now that we have a group of people that are having contact on a national level without many outsiders, although they may be from a farm in Berks County or from a farm in Shamokin, is that contact with the outsiders going to lead them to greater assimilation with mainstream society, or did they return home with a renewed sense of difference, that they felt really different and wanted to cultivate that difference afterwards? And does that come out in their writings? Are they talking just about their friends and neighbors, or are they talking about other people, English-speaking people that they're having contact with? If we ignore what the Pennsylvania Dutch actually wrote, we won't get good answers to these questions. And I believe that they are really, the ones that we have are really the tip of the iceberg. Just as an example, I recently learned about a set of letters from Harleysville and from Fleetwood. And there are 20 plus letters that are in that collection as well. And they're written in Pennsylvania Dutch by Pennsylvania Dutch soldiers in the Civil War. So there really just has to be more out there in Pennsylvania Dutch attics that people have kind of stored away just because, well, we can't read them. We took them to a German speaker and he can't read them either. So they're probably not worth anything. It's probably just the writings of a confused farmer. But they're not. They're not. Right. Once you start looking at them, when you know what you're looking for, they're really valuable, I think, to our cultural legacy.
Yeah, John. I mean, geez, there's so much. There's so much. Could you go back to that last slide?
Sure.
Could you please?
Oh, no, I can.
I was going to talk about a couple of those points, at least from my perspective, and I'd love to get your take on it too. I can't thank you enough, and our community can't thank you enough for doing this research, because no one else is doing it. I mean, you have that. Josh has that special skill set that he can look at these letters and he does understand. He can read them, and that would be, if you imagine you come across, just like Josh said, you come across a pile of these letters in your attic, in your grandparents' attic. They passed away. You're cleaning the house out, like so many people have to do at some point in their life. You can't understand it. It looks like chicken scratch in some cases. And yeah, you can't, maybe you ask on Facebook, hey, anybody can read this? And everyone's like, no. So,
right.
What are you going to do? You're going to throw them out? Probably. I totally get that. And sadly, think of how many have been thrown out over the years or have been burned or whatever.
Right.
But I was just thinking about, so I grew up a huge Civil War buff, and there's a famous Civil War historian. He's passed away now, Shelby Foote. If anybody's watched the Ken Burns documentary, he's quoted often throughout that film. And the one thing that he said at one point in that documentary that really stuck with me, and especially thinking about it from the perspective of these Pennsylvania Dutch farm boys who, before they got drafted or enlisted, had probably never strayed more than, I don't know, a couple miles from their family farm. Right. He made the comment that, when the war was over and these guys went home, whether they were from the North or from the South, they knew that there was this United States because they'd marched its roads, they had walked its fields, they had climbed its mountains. And prior to that war, they would have never had that experience. So my take on this idea of this greater assimilation and greater differentiation, there had to physically be some kind of reaction from these guys when they got home. Mm-hmm. That they could say I walked from North Carolina to Savannah, Georgia. I know how big this country is. I know how the people are different down there. To me, that had to be, minus the gore and the violence that they experienced. That had to be I would think that had to be a lasting experience. And I wonder, the one thing I always wonder about too, in regards to this is, so here you had these guys, and in their own regiments, they would have been with other Pennsylvania Dutch soldiers because, they tended to be brought from the same geographical areas and things like that. Right. But then they came into contact with other regiments from other states, and they realized, for most of them, maybe for the first time, I'm unique in the sense that where I come from, we have this language that a couple counties over or in the next state doesn't exist. And right. I often wonder, what did that do for them? And you mentioned this, what what did that do for them, thinking about what does it mean for them to be Pennsylvania Dutch?
Mm-hmm.
Having, and that question really fascinates me.
Yeah.
I don't know what, just in your thought, like, just,
yeah,
I'm sure you've sat and thought about this for sure.
yeah. I mean, it's no accident, right, that after the Civil War is kind of the resurgence in, especially in American regionalism after the Civil War, and so it looks like people are kind of returning, and they're moving towards this greater differentiation part. I think the assimilation is there, right? You're going to have more contact with outsiders. You're going to know that you're unique, but that the world's a bigger place. But on the other hand, they're coming back and they're saying, well, we were confronted with some pretty terrible things, pretty terrible life decisions, and you probably get to appreciate home and family a lot more. And so you probably appreciate all those little things. And what it may have done for some of them is, to double down on that and say, oh, you remember my mom used to make this food or whatever. I want to make it again, or I want to get back into it. And there is that resurgence after the Civil War, of interest in Pennsylvania Dutch things by the Pennsylvania Dutch. If we look at, the culture, the folk art and things like that, there is a resurgence that happens after the Civil War, whether that was part of American regionalism just as a movement, or whether it was, a direct impact from these soldiers. You have to wonder, but it certainly would have, it was impactful enough to change, I think, the course of Pennsylvania Dutch history as well as American history, because we were such a geographically and linguistically more or less isolated group, that we really had to come to terms with what it meant to be an American, what it meant to be Pennsylvania Dutch as an American. And unfortunately, people that have looked back on that period have kind of always said, well, they really weren't, jumping up and down to join the war effort. But I'm finding the opposite. I'm finding that they participated and went through everything that an English speaking soldier did. It's just
right. And also we need to take into consideration the families that stayed back were farming, of course, and producing food for the war effort. And I'm sure producing goods as well, whether it was blankets or clothing. They're growing food for the army, and just like we did during the Revolution as well. Washington would say the Pennsylvania Dutch fed the Continental Army, and there's no reason for us to believe that the Pennsylvania Dutch farmers didn't help feed the Union Army during the Civil War as well. And that was a vital key towards victory in the war as well. If we didn't have the food and the weapons and the goods, the army wouldn't have been able to do what it had to do.
Right.
So we also, I don't know how many letters you're getting. You talked a lot about this. There was this back and forth, but it would also be so fascinating to see what's mom and dad saying to their boys, to their sons, or wives to their husbands, as they're away from home for the first time and maybe never coming home. You don't know. That has to be fascinating aspect of this research as well.
Yeah, and that's what's lacking, and they must be there. They must be. I'm not a betting person, but I'm going to bet on it. The back and forth letters, because so far we only have the one-sided. We only have the letters that were sent home. We don't have the letters that they received. Probably because they'd have to carry them. Right. And so they probably just got rid of them. But I can't imagine that everybody got rid of every letter that they received.
Yeah,
I think
I agree with you. Us Pennsylvania Dutch, we save everything, right?
I know, right? Right. And that was actually one of the most surprising things, is that I've not come across a letter that was written on the back of another letter. Right. So You would think that would be there, but
Absolutely.
wasn't at all.
Oh my goodness. Well, Dolly says, thank you, Josh, for the amazing presentation. So incredibly interesting. You've renewed my pride in being dumb Dutch. So Dolly, I'm damn proud to be dumb Dutch every day. Josh, I can't thank you enough for sharing your people. This is just the tip of what this man knows. I can't sing his praises enough. No, don't let him fool you. This guy knows so much, and I'd love to have Josh on and talk about another topic that he has done quite a lot of research about, and because he's done so many. Josh, thank you so much for sharing what you're doing. Please keep up the great work, of course. And, we can't wait till you get that book on all of this research written, that, the book on Pennsylvania Dutch Civil War letters. But thank you so much. It really I hope it gave my audience a lot to think about. These are things that we just don't think about. And when you really start putting the human aspect to history, that's when history really means something. I try to make my students aware of that as much as possible. That's when you can make these emotional connections with these people. And, they were people just like us. You know what I mean? Thank you so much, Josh. I hope to have you on in the future again. And people, you can check him out live this Sunday. He'll be back in the Commonwealth at the Mountain Mary presentation at the Pennsylvania German Cultural Heritage Center. So check that out. That was an awesome presentation as well. And you'll learn a whole nother topic and a whole lot of stuff from our good friend, Josh Brown. Josh, thanks so much. Stay warm out there in Wisconsin. Safe travels to Pennsylvania. And we look forward to hearing from you again in the future.
All right. Take care.
Mock Scoot.
Mock Scoot.
What do I say? People, my friends, what do we say from that? What a wonderful... People say history's boring. Just slap those people when they tell you that stuff. Unbelievable. If Josh ever does publish a book on this stuff, which I hope he does at some point in the future, I will keep all of you up to date on these things. But we need to keep moving on. We're running long, but it was too fascinating to cut short, right? Every month, those of you that join the show know that we talk a little bit of Pennsylvania Dutch. And this month, I bring you this poem. So, I can't do that because I'm going to take myself out of the screen. But this month, I'd like to highlight the poem Es Friehjaahrs Lied by H. Fisher, who lived from 1822 to 1909. I have the Pennsylvania Dutch on the left and the English on the right, so you can follow whichever language you want. It is March. We've kind of had a weird winter here in Pennsylvania. We didn't have much of a winter, but March has been really weird. We've had these little snowstorms, and it's been weird. Spring wants to get here, but it's just kind of like scratching the door. So I wanted to go with this. Es Friehjaahrs Lied translates into the spring song. So I'll read the Pennsylvania Dutch. You can follow along on the English if you can't understand Pennsylvania Dutch. Der Winter ist fat und ich bin so froh, wann kommt und wann geht. Die Wolken sind weiß und der Himmel ist blau und lieblich ist, wo man sich dreht. Die Hinkel, die Gachse, die Zwiebele, die wachse und die Amschel, die baut sich ein Nest. Der Winter ist fat, uns Frühjahr ist da und alles guckt frisch, grün und nahe. Uns Lebli, uns Gräsli vergrüne sich so in dem lieblichen Sonnenschein. Die Sonne schmelzt der Reife, die Feckel, die Pfeife und selke gefällt mir's alles best. How about that? Nice spring poem for you guys. Henry Fisher, he knew what he was doing, huh? It's a good poet. I love his stuff. All right, what else we got coming up? Well, every month I also bring you a song. And this month I'm bringing you one that is brand new. Those of you that follow the YouTube channel, you probably saw this. I need to remove this. Well, I will here in a minute. So, as you know, I play music as well, and I love to write new stuff. But in the tradition of American folk music, which we find a lot, you take an old melody from another song and you put new words to it. And that's what I did. There's a very famous song called, oh, geez, now I'm putting myself on the spot. The Carter Family did it. I can't think of the name of it. I'm going to think of the song that I name it. Anyway, well, you'll hear the melody and maybe it'll sound familiar to you. But I took that and I wrote a song about, ironically, it fits really well with tonight's theme. They crossed the great ocean. Who's they? Our forefathers and foremothers. Whether your family came in the 1700s or the 1800s, they crossed that great ocean for whatever reason. Was it religious persecution? Was it the opportunity to own land? Was it the opportunity to make something of themselves in a country where they didn't have to fall under the realm of a king or a queen or some kind of emperor? So I took that idea and I took this famous melody, and I have to give writing credit to my son, because there were a couple nights where I was working on this and my son Oscar was down there with the ukulele playing along, and I got stuck, and I turned to him and I said, I don't know what to do here. And my son said, well, why don't we now he's 8, people. He's like, let's just try this line or this lyric. And let me tell you, he was dead on. So I have to give some writing credit to my son Oscar on this. Enjoy. They crossed the great ocean. You're going to see old photographs of Pennsylvania Dutch farm life. And that comes from a very famous book put out by the Pennsylvania German Society. I have it linked in the show notes below. I'm going to shut up now and I'm going to play you guys a song. 300 years have come and gone since they left all behind. They crossed the great Atlantic Sea, looking for somewhere to thrive. They landed in old Philadelphia town, not knowing what to do. They headed north to settle down, a life to start brand new. They crossed that great ocean with hopes and dreams to be. We're here today because of them, continuing our story. They cleared the trees and farmed the fields, their roots deep into the land. And when the call of liberty came, for freedom they took a stand. They crossed that great ocean with hopes and dreams to be. We're here today because of them, continuing our story. They passed their language on to us, their stories and their ways. Their actions shaped us more than we know, for that we are just like clay. They crossed that great ocean with hopes and dreams to be. We're here today because of them, continuing our story. Now the story turns to us. Can we fulfill that dream? Our sons and daughters to raise up and follow their lead. They crossed that great ocean with hopes and dreams to be. We're here today because of them, continuing our story. They crossed that great ocean with hopes and dreams to be. We're here today because of them, continuing our story. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that song. Had fun writing it, and I have to admit, there were times when I had to stop because the lyrics started to get me emotional, and poof, still do. We can be thankful for the heritage that we have and the sacrifices that so many people that came before us made to make that decision to get on a boat and leave everything to come to a place they didn't know and then survive, and not only survive but flourish and pass things on to us 300 years later, 200 years later. What a story. And how much do we have to be proud of? We have so much to be proud of. And if you'd like to show off your Pennsylvania Dutch pride, well, you can get some Pennsylvania Dutch merch. How's that a transition for you guys? We've been bragging this up for the last couple months. Of course, please check out our Pennsylvania Dutch merch shop at Zazzle.com. I'll show you here's some, these were brand new for last month. I love them. I know them all. That is great. And our animals with all the different Pennsylvania Dutch words on them. I love that. Of course, we have some others there. there. We can thank and give a shout out to some of our friends there who are showing off their Donabera t-shirts. If you're interested in getting one, why you gotta go to Zazzle.com/PA Dutch stuff. Check it out. And if you want to buy some, it doesn't have to be a t-shirt. You can get it on a hoodie. You can get it on a magnet. I got a cool magnet on my refrigerator from one of our designs, from Rachel and my designs. Check it out. Zazzle.com/PA Dutch stuff. And if you like what we're doing here and you'd like to financially support the channel, feel free to buy me a coffee. Go to buymeacoffee.com/Doug Maidenford. All money that's donated to that campaign, of course, goes to the upkeep of the channel, whether it's new guitar strings or, I don't know, anything that'll help make this show better. And if you feel like you don't want to give money, that's okay too. Just keep tuning in every month, and that's good enough, if you ask me. And I can tell you right now, mark your calendars, dear friends, our next PA Dutch Live will be, drum roll, Wednesday, April the 19th, 2023 at 6 p.m. And in April, I will be bringing on special guest Candace Perry, and she will be talking to us. It's kind of another history-based episode all about the group known as the Schwenkfelders. And if you've never heard of them, perfect opportunity for you to learn about them next month. And if you have learned about them, but you don't really know who they are, you just know, hey, I think they got some museum down there in Montgomery County or Bucks County or somewhere down that way. Isn't that where the Schwenkfelders are from? We're going to learn their whole story next month in April on the 19th. So please be ready for that. I can't wait to welcome Candace on. She is a wealth of knowledge. Real quick, we got some people giving some great comments. Doug, wonderful job, my family. Oh, thanks, Nadine. I really, really appreciate that. Jeff Marks, our friend, says, excellent. I agree, Jeff. I agree. Angie saying, resilience. That's what kept us going. It's what are going to keep us going as well. Nadine also said, hey, real quick, we just ordered and received our new t-shirts. Great quality, fast shipping. There you go, people. Order yours now. Get out there, check the website out. I really appreciate it. We're not doing it for the money. We're doing it to pass the culture and our story and our love of our art and our folk life and all of these things, our language, on to that next generation, to our generation, whatever. People, it has been an absolute pleasure to be with you, as it is every month. I thank you for taking time out of your busy lives to come over to the YouTube channel or the Facebook page and join PA Dutch Live. I can't wait to be with you next month as well. In the meantime, there'll be tons of great quality content coming out on the YouTube channel. Follow along on social media. We're on Instagram at PA Dutch 101. We're on Facebook at PA Dutch 101, and we're on Twitter at PA Dutch 101. So, whatever social media platform you're on, I'm not on TikTok yet, and I don't think I'm going to be, although a lot of people have asked me to. That's something I'm going to have to think about. I don't think I'm TikTok ready, but we're going to keep at the Facebook page, the Instagram, and the YouTube channel, of course, and Twitter. So you can join us and find us on those platforms, whichever platform you tend to gravitate to. My dear friends, till the 19th, as we say at the end of every month, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back next month. And until then, you know your Pennsylvania Dutch. You know what to say. Say it with me. I spy dry. Mock Scoot, everybody. Mock Scoot zu dir, Mock Scoot zu dir, Mock Scoot zu dir für now. Unsere Zeit ist all und so, es ist Mock's gut für now. Hoff wieder mit dir zu sein, hoff du bringst zurück ein Freund. Mock's gut zu dir, Mock's gut zu dir, Mock's gut zu dir für now. Unsere Zeit ist all und so, es ist Mock's gut für now. Hoff wieder mit dir zu sein, hoff du bringst zurück ein Freund. Und so mach's gut, lieber Freund, mach's gut.